We are at Northbridge Brewing Company today, and with me are two gentlemen and true legends of Australian brewing history. Both Ken Arrowsmith and Roger Bussell have really helped shape the industry here in WA, and with a combined experience of around 60 years plus of brewing knowledge. It's an awesome privilege to have you guys on Mike's Beer Club today. Thanks for taking the time out, Ken and Roger.
Pleasure.
It's our pleasure, Mike.
So there's probably a lot to get through, and I've been excited about coming along to Northbridge Brewing Company where we're at today to ask some questions, but it's probably easier to start from the end, if that makes sense. We're in the middle of Northbridge in Perth CBD, where yourself, Ken, have been head brewer since 2014 when NBC opened. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We've been open about 2.5 years now, and I was involved with the design and the layout and the product development, and now the brewing. Yeah.
And that was you took around a 5 or so year hiatus from commercial brewing before you came back to NBC. And I was reading online that it was a mate of one of the owners or directors of Northbridge Brewing that kind of convinced you to come back into the fold.
Yes, I'd been out of the industry for about 3-4 years, and out of the blue I got a call from a very old school friend who I hadn't seen for about 25 years, and they said they had this little project going up in Northbridge, and would I like to come and have a look? And I couldn't resist the temptation, and here we are 3.5 years later. Yes.
And you had, I guess, one of the terms and conditions of you coming on board was to have carte blanche over the type of beer that you wanted to brew at NBC?
Certainly the core range, it was a collaboration with the directors. Obviously you've got to target your products towards a market, but yes, the directors know a lot about running hospitality events, and I know a little bit about brewing, and so between the group of us we put together what's a pretty good brew pub. Yeah.
Excellent. I wanted to kind of come back from there a little bit. One of the great things about being here today is I've got the distinction of having two gentlemen with beers named after you, or beers featuring your name. Roger, in your case, it's Rogers from Little Creatures.
You have to check where the apostrophe is. There were two of us.
Roger Bailey was the other Roger?
Bailey's the other one, yes. He was the engineer. He used to work with us at Swan, and then he was the engineer designing and commissioning Little Creatures Brewing.
And so you have kind of a shared history together. Ken, you're his EMU bitter, and for interstate viewers and overseas viewers, it's we'll put a picture up on screen of the EMU bitter can featuring a kind of stretched out and muscled up version of yourself.
Yeah, that was just a bit of marketing fun in the early 90s, the caricature of the old brewer, etc., which somehow assumed my name. But it was a very successful campaign at the time, and it probably reinforced the authenticity of the brand, and it was very successful for a period of time.
When did you two first start kind of in together in your history?
1979, when Canning Vale had just started. I joined after it had started. And Ken, you were already there, or just?
I was only just there, a few months ahead of you, Roger, I think. Yeah.
So 79 was a bit of a year of change around Swan Brewery, and I'll kind of skip back over the timeline to that when you guys started out at Swan. The original Swan Brewery site, from someone that isn't from Perth, was on the Swan River, below where Kings Park is, and you moved out to Canning Vale in 79. They opened up production out there.
78.
The old building now, the historic building on Swan River, is, did you both ever get the chance to kind of go into that old historic Swan Brewery site in the 70s or 80s after it had kind of been shuttered or not used anymore? Did it feature in your kind of experience?
I had the opportunity to see it in my first visit to Perth in 72. Had a look around it, and then after having joined Swan here in Canning Vale, I was involved in trying to rescue some of the equipment from it when it was finally closed up and abandoned.
Right. Was there much to rescue from the old site, Roger?
Oh, good Lord, no, not from any sensible point of view, but for historical bits and pieces of which I speak to my wife. I love old bits and pieces of copper and brass and so on, and there was a lot of that around, yeah.
There was also a brewery closer to Perth CBD, the Emu Brewery in Nedlands.
The operational brewery, that was the one. The Swan River Brewery, in fact, hadn't brewed for some years before '78, but it was still used for kegging and some fermentation.
Okay, right. So Canning Vale was where you had the bulk of your work, and where you turned up every morning to head out and brew, Ken?
It was a fantastic experience for me as a young man joining the industry, because it was a brand new state-of-the-art, highly automated facility on a massive scale, and to be involved in some of the commissioning and the start-up and the development in a plant like that was just a fantastic grounding for a young brewer, yeah.
If I could fast forward to 2012, and I was trying to piece together the different kind of brewery and production sites, but in 2012, Canning Vale, the production at Canning Vale was moved to Tasmania, and that was and Sydney, and that was after you had both left Swan Brewing. Is that correct? So what year did you finish up at Swan?
91.
Okay, right, again.
Yeah, I can't remember when I left, probably about 2010 I think. So the brewery was still operating when I left Lion Nathan. We just chose for family reasons to do something totally different. I had my own little small business, and so I was very sad to hear 18 months, 2 years later, to hear the closing of the plant.
When the plant closed in 2012, there was a lot of talk about the kind of the I guess sadness around that site and production being moved into state, and some reports around then were talking about Swan Draft and Emu Bitter kind of falling away. There was a threat of that drink just kind of fading into history, as happens with a lot of beer and beer labels. But that hasn't happened, and I guess there's a kind of a romanticism attached to Emu Bitter and Swan Draft. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think the consumers didn't let it happen in the end. It'd be fair to say that there was very little marketing support for those brands over the final few years of their life. But they did continue to be manufactured, albeit interstate. And yes, I think there's been a resurgence, particularly with the Swan Draft and some of the Emu Export over the last couple of years. You can even find cans of Emu Export in some of the trendy small bars around town, which is some things become so unfashionable that all of a sudden they become fashionable again. And I think that's one of the things that might have happened to that brand, for example. But I mean, the beer quality is good. I mean, it's good mainstream drinking beer, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be popular, particularly in a warm climate.
What do you both look for in your kind of beer fridges when you get home on a Friday night and you're just looking for something to quaff?
Personally, I've normally got a carton of some reasonable quality European lager in the fridge, and probably a six-pack of some extreme craft beer that I haven't yet tried. So I like to try all the different new beers as they come out in different styles, but they'll be a stubby at a time, whereas a nice, well-made, good quality European-style lager is probably the beer I'll have one or two of before dinner, as a rule.
Roger, what's in your beer fridge at the moment?
Well, some Emu Export, of course, because we take that sailing. But I home brew as well, so. But I agree with Ken, but there's some lovely beers out there which aren't necessarily session beers. There's some that are superb with particular foods. And a lot of people don't appreciate how good some of them are with certain foods. I mean, the Rauch beer is a good example, a smoked beer, superb with cheese and so on. But it's not something you'd necessarily drink after you've mowed the lawn. It's one I had yesterday down Little Creatures, White Rabbit Red. It's a very sour beer, brilliant with certain foods, I'm sure. I enjoyed the bit I had, but it wasn't something I was going to keep drinking.
In the concentration of breweries that have started in WA, and recently you've got a beers coming out like Perth Local. Ferrell's responsible for that one, and that's a return to some of the locally brewed lagers, or I guess their nod to locally brewed lagers. Have you had a chance to have a tipple of Perth Local and kind of check the history of why they did that last year?
I haven't tried it myself yet, no, but I'm not entirely surprised, particularly as some of these operations get larger and larger. They're looking at distribution and more mainstream sales. In the end, beer has to be drinkable and sessionable, particularly if you want to sell a lot of it. You don't want to sell half a pint of beer, you want to sell 3 pints of beer. So drinkability, sessionability is really important. So again, particularly in summer in Perth when it's hot, I'm not at all surprised to see a more moderate flavoured sort of lager style being launched by some of the larger craft breweries. Yeah, absolutely.
And down south, or down the southwest, that hop forward beer style has just been the kind of de rigueur of breweries, and a lot of very hoppy red IPAs coming out that we've managed to get our hands across in the last few months. Roger, you contributed to some of the hop history or hop farming history in WA. Is that right? Did you have a hand in kind of writing some of that?
I have written some stuff. I didn't know it was been published anywhere, but I just got interested in it. A lot of things I get interested in the industry and write them down, and then if someone asks, I'll let them have a copy. I hadn't realised it had gone out anywhere.
You can find anything on the internet these days.
No, it's but I mean, it's not surprising. Hops were grown here because there was a demand for them with the early breweries, and they were hard to get hold of, and they got it. Essentially, they should be fresh, and so it was not surprising they tried growing them. Here, have you been? Did you go down to what's it called? The Carry Valley Resort.
Well, down in Carradale, but not in the resort.
Did you go past the resort?
I believe we probably did, yeah, on the main road.
There's a big lake there, right. And it was Swan who built the lake, because just below it were the hop farms.
There's a few streets around there called Hop Garden Road.
It's all part of the Arthur Bunn, or the Bunn family farm. Yeah.
I usually try and kind of finish up interviews just talking about some of the breweries that may have surprised you, or some of the guys and girls that you are following in the brewing industry, or just even some of the ones that you've had contact with most recently, whether it's WA, Australia, or further afield. So who would you name check at the moment for kind of breweries that you look to or follow?
Don't really know where to start. I mean, within the WA scene, I don't see a lot of what's going on down south, although I admire what Brian's doing at Artisan. But the guys at Ferrell and Mash both run extremely high quality operations. They continue to be innovative, particularly out of the Swan Valley site for Ferrell, and I think they make craft beer of a quality that stands up against any in the world. Absolutely.
Roger, who do you follow?
Well, you've got to remember it is a very sociable, friendly industry, and right around Australia we know an awful lot of people and are in contact with them one way and another, even if it's only email. We hear about what's going on, and it's from that point of view, it's a wonderful industry. Sorry?
Sorry, I was just agreeing with you. The WA Brewing Association is a leading local organisation for all the craft brewers.
Heavily involved in Wubba, Ken?
Only as a member at this stage, but certainly does its best to promote craft beer in WA, and there's regular meetings, both technical and social. The Institute of Brewing still runs technical and social gatherings. There's one coming up in July, I think, on a periodic basis, particularly if there's a guest speaker coming to town that can be corralled to give a technical presentation or whatever. And the CBIA is increasing their efforts to gain members over here as well, and they tend to work more on the political, legislative side of the craft beer industry. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to get together. All of the shows, the competitions, whether judging or attending the awards, there's always opportunity to rub shoulders with all the brewers around the state. It's terrific.
We've got the WA Beer Awards judging about in June, so
2nd and 3rd of July.
well, yeah, okay, but the receivals will be in June.
Are you both in the judging chair for the awards coming up?
Crikey, I'm a steward in the background.
And that's understating it again. Roger's been very influential in organising the awards for many years, but yeah, I'll probably be judging again. Yes, the competition season seems to start after Easter, so there's the big Melbourne show which goes along with Gabs coming up first, and then there'll be the Perth Beer Show. And CBIA, I think, are running a show in Adelaide this year, and a conference, which will be really good for craft brewers. 2-day conference with a bit of a trade exhibition. So I'll probably try and get to that this year, because it will be quite worthwhile, I think.
Excellent. I would be remiss without saying that we've been kind enough to grab a table at Northbridge Brewing Company today. So if anyone wants to come down and say hello to you, Ken, in the brew house, or grab one of the beers, how do they find NBC?
Oh, on Facebook, on the web, on Instagram, we are everywhere. But Lake Street in Northbridge, you can't miss us.
So do you have a seasonal schedule here at NBC, Ken, that you have project beers coming out, or do you stick to the core range?
Yeah, no, we've got 5 core range beers on tap, and we normally have a 6th on tap as well, which will be the single batch edition. So every 6 or 8 weeks we'll do a single brew of a different innovative style, and it's there until it's gone. Currently we've got an XPA on tap, and next Tuesday we're putting a citrus Saison in for the following special. So yeah, we'd like to keep them rotating along. Yep. Dare say there'll be a stout for the winter or whatever, or porter, or maybe a smoked porter. We'll see.
Good. Good.
Maybe a collab with Roger.
Would that be on the cards? Getting a collab brew?
It's by no means unlikely, yeah, at some point. Yeah.
Roger, Ken, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time out to chat to Mike's Beer Club today. It'd be good to catch you in Adelaide or somewhere down the track, but thank you, gentlemen, very, very much.
Good to meet you.
Pleasure, Mike.
Thank you.